Okay. YouTube up and going? Great, looks like it is. So we will call our regular meeting of council to order at 2 p.m. And first, we will just recognize that we are holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Huipjasit and Sishat First Nation. The council, we have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to be added? Seeing none. And any late items from the city clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have one. It's item K1 from the Ministry of Forests in regards to the acquisition of ownership of TFL 44.
Great. Would somebody like to move that we adopt the agenda with the addition of with the late item?
So moved.
So moved.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we have minutes from the special meeting of council held at 10:30 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on July 27th.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Seconded. Any comments on the minutes? Councillor Corbeil?
Yes, on the regular meeting under new business, the train station seismic assessment, we were going to have a discussion at the next council meeting. Is there some reason why that's not on the agenda?
I think what we had talked about putting on the agenda was did you add that as a late item? Or sorry, as a under new business last meeting?
Under new business.
Oh, okay. I don't recall that. City clerk, are you able to comment on that?
It's on page 12.
Actually, I'm going to defer to the CAO because I know we had some discussion about this, Madam Mayor, and I can't recall what the decision was.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't recall what council's direction was in the previous meeting. It was discussed. I can't recall if it was notice of motion or, but I recall that it had to be discussed at this meeting. So if council can bring it on as a late item.
We can just have it as an item under new business, and it could be an actual motion if Councillor Corbeil wishes to make a motion on it. I had requested that we put on the agenda a discussion about the train station lands, but I asked staff to just hold that off until the September meeting because we had quite a few other things to talk about at this meeting, and I thought it probably wasn't urgent. So that's been put off, but Councillor Corbeil, we can talk about the seismic upgrades in new business.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, then moved and seconded, all in favor. Thank you. And that brings us to public input period. City Clerk, do we have any input received?
None, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
No.
Wonderful, and no delegations, no unfinished business. So moving on to staff reports, and the first one, Councillor Washington, is accounts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated August 10, 2020 be received, and checks numbering 146542, 146588 inclusive, and payments of account totaling $14,536,554.43 be approved. And after I get seconded, I'd like to ask the Director of Finance to explain why we're so high this time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, so when we have our tax collection in July of every year, we usually come forward with a large amount of funds. So we usually transfer those funds to our investment account. And with that, within this, $12 million being transferred into our investment account.
Just leave it.
And then the other tax requisitions that we collect on behalf of the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District and the Hospital District and BC Assessment, those are all paid at the same time, the start of August. So that's why we see such a large amount of transactions go through at this time of year.
Wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. Councillor, are there any questions on the accounts? Okay, seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. And moving on, we have the presentation of the annual report. I'm assuming this is the clerk's department.
Madam Mayor, I can speak to that. You have before you the annual report for 2019. The report has been duly presented at a previous meeting and in the public, in the possession of the public for the required time for input. And I'm not aware of any input at this point. We can ask the clerk's department if we've received any.
Thank you. Have there been any submissions from the public?
Actually, we have received nothing, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And are there questions or comments from council? Okay, seeing no questions, I just want to thank staff for all the work that went into this. The report looks fantastic and it's a really great snapshot of what's happened over the last year in the city and some of the progress that's been made and just a good overview of each of our departments. So thank you for all the work that's gone into this. I know the clerk's department and our manager of communications and support staff there have put a lot of work into this. Would somebody like to move that we receive or adopt as presented? Adopt as presented.
Adopt as, yes.
Thank you. The motion as written. And is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, all in favor? Carried. And item 3 is from the Director of Finance, the Statement of Financial Information for the year ended December 31st, 2019.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So what we have in front of us is the annual statement of financial information that has to be completed every year. This year it was due as of August 31st. So this is a Financial Information Act requirement that is completed annually. And once approved by council, we'll send that on to the province for submission.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Paulson.
When I go through these, I always kind of go to the ones that glare and like stand out. This isn't a problem that I'm trying to bring up, but maybe just a clarification of who TriTech Group is. I suspect that it's group involved with the sewage lagoon, and they were paid out of maybe a little background on who TriTech is.
Yes, TriTech is the contracting company that is doing our sewage lagoon. So they are the company that is completing all the works over at the sewage lagoon.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to make the motion there?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. So moved and seconded that council approve the statements and schedules included in the Statement of Financial Information for 2019, prepared to comply with the Financial Information Act as outlined in the report from the Director of Finance dated July 31st, 2020. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And moving on to item 4 from the Director of Finance, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for 2019.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So annually, the City of Port Alberni produces the comprehensive financial report that is provided to council to receive. And it includes a little bit more detail beyond the financial statements that we have annually audited. So we also include statistics, and this report has been provided to the Government Financial Officers Association annually for the last 26 years prior to 2019, and received the award every year since that time. So it's a good summary of the City of Port Alberni financially and the outlook for the community.
Thank you. Are there questions on that? Okay. Seeing no questions, Councillor Paulson, would you like to make that motion?
I'd like to move that the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2019 be received.
Second, Madam.
Okay, moved and seconded, and seeing no questions, all in favor? Carried. Item 5 from the City Clerk, we have the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation resolutions of shareholders. City Clerk, do you want to just give an overview of this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, this is resolutions of shareholder in writing that council is required to endorse each year as the sole shareholder of the corporation. This is so that the corporation can file their annual report. And the resolutions includes the requirement to hold the annual general meeting, acceptance of the financial statements, appointment of the directors, and endorsement of appointment of the auditor.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motion?
I would. And before I read the motion, I'd just like to say that as the liaison for the community forest, that the Community Forest Board works extremely hard and has done an exceptional job for the Alberni Valley. Saying that, I move that the council endorse the Alberni Valley Community Forest Corporation resolutions of shareholder in writing as presented.
Second.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll just echo your comments about the board. They've done a great job of representing us and representing the community, working on bringing us in quite a bit of revenue this year as well. So a lot of appreciation to them for that. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And on to item 6 from the Economic Development Manager, connect to the keys.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 2 infrastructure funding streams available at the present time, and staff see this as an opportunity to advance the Connect the Keys project in Council's strategic plan or another project of your choosing. The first stream is community, culture, and recreation, and it seems very directly aligned with the strategic plan in that the outcome is an improved access to and or increased quality of cultural, recreational, and or community infrastructure. Under that stream, the federal and provincial governments contribute 73.33% of costs, with the municipality contributing the rest. Construction has to be completed as of March 31st, 2026. We currently do not have an estimate of cost on the project, so we are simply looking for council to continue moving forward with this. The average grant approval first intake was $2.5 million. The largest award was 13.4. The deadline for this is October 1st. The planning, assessment, and design costs are eligible, along with capital costs. And part of the reason we're seeking council's approval is that there's roughly 100 questions to respond to with a fair bit of detailed information. The project does not have to be shovel ready, and the consultations with the community do not have to be complete. But the public is to be aware of the, in part, that's why we're bringing it to your attention at this present time. The second stream, rural and northern communities, lists the same outcome in terms of improved access or increased quality as an alternative outcome, but our key funding contact says the alternative outcome is no less valuable or eligible as the core outcomes. And in fact, they're suggesting to us that we submit the same project to both streams of funding. The advantage to the second is that the deadline is October 2nd, so it gives us a bit more time. Roughly the same questions go into both applications. The average grant approval in the first intake was 2.07 million, and the largest award was 7.4 million. The difference between the streams, this one has got 58.7 million versus 100 million in the first, hence the larger amounts that are available to us. There was a new funding stream announced last week on August the 5th, in which the senior governments will pay 80% of the costs, but the project needs to be complete by the end of next year, 2021, and it needs to be shovel ready. Our key contact says they don't have the details in place yet. In other words, he doesn't know when the closing on it will be. He doesn't know if they're going to implement other eligibility criteria. He recommends that we carry on whatever project we're bringing forward. Just carry on as if that's the project, and if the eligibility criteria become available prior to our submission and we want to go that route, then that would be up to us. But really, it's do you want us to move forward with the Connecting Keys project, or do you want to choose another project for us to be investing time and money in?
Thank you very much for that, Pat. Are there questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I for one, am quite excited about this, Pat. The third grant you talked about specifically spells out cycling and walking paths. It pays up to 80%. And no doubt we would be consulting with First Nations in any regard, but we should be discussing, boy, this is echoing like I'm in the echo chamber. We should be discussing with the Scott and Hoopachesset the possibility of extending this this pathway all the way out to Paper Mill Dam and maybe as far as Hector Road, because I think there's a huge opportunity here, and we shouldn't sell ourselves short. So good work, Pat, and hopefully one of those grants flies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I think this is one of the most exciting projects that comes out of our strategic plan. And I'm really excited about the possibility of uniting our communities with this connection. So yeah, I'm very much in support of this project. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I first did this, I thought we're not quite there yet. So I'm grateful that you clarified that this doesn't have to be a shovel-ready project in order to apply for the grant, because there is a lot of steps we're going to have to go through in order to get started. But I think this is going to be a wonderful project, not only for locals, but it's going to hugely help our tourism attraction for come and enjoy our beautiful waterfront and enjoy the walkway. I often get lots of questions, how can I get from here to there? So it is a demand for tourists. That's great. I'm very excited. So thank you, Pat, for doing this.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to point out that there's a lot of staff members have been involved in the early consideration of whether or not we should be submitting this. Of course, what is key for us is that it's in your strategic plan, and actually a multimodal current language is multi-use. Pathway is in the strategic plan twice. So if council does approve us going forward, we will be asking a lot of the entire crew, the entire management team, and several of the employees as well. And we likely would be seeking a couple of to issue a couple of small contracts to make sure that we're ready. As you can imagine, with 20 pages of questions, a lot of detailed questions, we're needing to really dig into it. But both of the current streams do allow for planning, design as eligible costs. So we're excited to see that.
That's great. Councillor Paulson.
Oh, I'm absolutely in favor of the project, and also having staff move forward with the applications. If you don't apply, you run the potential of leaving money on the table that could come into the community for economic renewal. And I totally support the project, and I think we should move forward and see if we can get some of this government funding.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read the motion that's there?
I'd like to move the council direct staff application for infrastructure funding to the Community, Culture and Recreation CCR program and the Rural and Communities R&D program in advance of the October 2020 deadlines for the purpose of developing a multimodal pathway between the Victoria Quay and Harbour Quay. And we can also apply the third grant.
Thank you. Oh, my screen just changed. Is there a seconder for that?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further comments? Councillor Corbeil.
Councillor Paulson was breaking up a little bit. Did you mention the COVID-19 resilience funding as well, Ron?
I alluded to the third revenue stream as well.
Okay.
You know, as we're doing the first two streams, I'm sure that we can take that information and apply it to that third stream. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think the more the better, for sure. Okay, so on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And moving on to item 7 from the fire chief, award of RFP 011-20, replacement of fire engine 1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the report seeks to award a successful bidder for the RFP to Fort Garry fire trucks. We sent the RFPs out and received 4 responses. As you can see, all 4 of them were a fair amount more than what had been previously budgeted for in the 5-year financial plan. So the truck committee went about evaluating each one of the proposals and determined that the unanimous recommendation from the truck committee was for Fort Garry fire trucks. We then engaged with Fort Garry fire trucks at that point and aimed to try to reduce costs as much as we could. So we went through on a number of different options that we might be able to reduce it on, and eventually, sorry, I'm flipping around here. Eventually found $42,530 that we were able to cut from the proposals submission. Of course, even with that said, it is $215,347.15 more than what was budgeted. So within the report, there's a recommendation to fund that out of IRF. So essentially borrowing from ourselves, funding it through IRF, and then have a repayment plan of 5 years in order to repay that back into the IRF fund.
Thank you.
Also, I'll just note here too that there is, we're also looking for direction with regards to this idle mitigation system. So essentially what the idle mitigation system is it's a battery powered system that when the truck is on a fire scene but not pumping, it'll shut off the diesel engine and it'll run off of batteries. So it kind of goes into a bit of a hybrid mode. We anticipate that that's going to obviously produce less emissions. There would be less carbon buildup in the engine, which could lead to some better long-term maintenance outcomes. And it aligns with the strategic plan priority 4, championing environmental leadership. However, that does come at a fairly significant cost of $29,300. So looking for direction if council would like to keep that in, which is reflected in the current recommendation, or if the price tag is just too much.
Thank you. Questions from council, starting with Councillor Poon.
Thank you. How did we get to a budget figure that's so far off the market value of these trucks? Has there been a massive increase in costs, or can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a fair question, a very fair question. So kind of in retrospect, looking back at how we get here, because I had the exact same question, you can see that, so the proponent that we engaged with, Fort Garry Fire Trucks, they typically see a 3 to 4% increase annually on how much more a fire truck is year after year for the same truck. Recently, Saskatoon Fire Department went through a similar question, and they compared the components of the US made, the US built components for the fire engine. They bought 2 trucks in 2018 and 2 trucks in 2020. And that increase was 13% in just over those 2 years for the US built components. And with Fort Garry Fire Trucks, who are a Canadian company, there's still 70% of the truck that comes from the United States. And the thinking is that probably most of that added increase over and above the 3 to 4% could be attributed to some of the tariffs that were imposed by the U.S. administration. So you have 3 to 4% year after year. You have a bump with tariffs somewhere between 2018 and now, and then the other part there too. Again, hindsight being 2020. You have an exchange rate that when we purchased our last fire engine, the dollar was at par. And now here, 11 years later, I think I looked it up, it was, I think we're at $1.34 right now. The conversion from a US dollar to a Canadian dollar. So when you add all of those things up, it's almost exactly what we paid last time to this time, just with those factored in.
When we account for replacement value in IRF, though, do we not recognize that, you know, the cost goes up with inflation over time, and that, you know, in this case, if we kind of know it's 3 to 4% per year, recognizing that it was a bit higher, but would that not already be accounted for in the estimate of that truck when we're IRFing it over the years?
Yeah, I think this is a conversation that I've had with the Director of Finance. I think he would probably be better positioned to answer that.
Sure. I'm not sure if he's on and available right now or not. Oh, there he is.
Sure. So yes, there is always that component of inflation, and that's reviewed annually to see if it's meeting the requirement for inflation. So it's always been around that 2% threshold. So when we are seeing a 3 or 4% increase year over year, and then the impact of the dollar, obviously it doesn't align with that inflationary rate that we have set in our.
Thank you. I have Councillor Corbeil and then Councillor Haggard next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, when we're talking fire trucks, Mr. Owens, $29,000 kind of doesn't seem like a lot of money because the fire trucks are so darn expensive. And the amount of time that they sit around idling, I would think that the battery would probably pay for itself over the life of the truck. And I'd like to point out that this is a 30-year truck, and good on you guys for working it for 30 years. There's nothing more frustrating to see a vehicle that looks to be in perfect shape with very few miles on it being put out to pasture. So hopefully we can keep all our fire trucks going for 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the question that Councillor Poon was trying to ask that we didn't, I don't think that Chief Owens answered quite what she was getting at. And what I was wondering is, you come and present to council a figure, and then you come back a few weeks later, over $237,000, you need more. Did you not do the research at the time you presented the original budget request for this fire truck? Did you not do any research about what the going rate was for fire trucks?
Yeah, respectfully, I think that the fire trucks are all unique to the community. Every community specs out what it is that they require. And without actually going out to tender or doing a request for proposals, yeah, I suppose that we were naive, or I was naive in believing that we would be. I was surprised, unpleasantly surprised at the additional amount required here as well. So I apologize that the initial submitted figure wasn't more accurate.
Well, I greatly respect the work that the firemen do, and it is a needed service in our community. I think that sometimes the fire department forgets we're not a large community, very small community, and we're not a rich community. And it seems, as much as I enjoy your company, you cost us a lot of money. So that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two questions for Chief Owens. The battery powered option you were talking about, you said almost like a hybrid. Is it like a hybrid so that when the truck will turn itself off, go to battery power, and then when you want it to spring into action, it will start itself up again to keep that, to use the pumper?
Yeah, it is. It won't engage as part of the propulsion system. So it's not a true hybrid in that when it's driving down the road, it will always be operating off of the diesel engine. But when you do arrive on scene, or you put the unit into deploy the parking brake on it, then so long as the pump isn't engaged, because the pump requires too much energy for the battery to keep up with, it will go into that battery mode and shut the diesel engine off. And then if it's a prolonged period of time, this one is rated for approximately an hour. So if you're on scene for a greater period than an hour and the batteries deplete, then automatically the diesel engine will start back up and start to regen the batteries.
Okay, thank you. And my second question would be, do you foresee this truck to have a extraordinary life of 30 years like your last one?
Absolutely, and that's part of the specification of the trucks, is that we need to specify something that is going to last that full length. So that's certainly a primary consideration. And yes, I do believe that this truck could last 30 years, just like the last.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Paulson and then Solda, and then I'll go back for people who have a second round of questions or comments.
I too am a little disappointed at the sticker shock, but having said that, as a member of our community, I am not willing to compromise the safety of our firefighters or our public because we're trying to pinch pennies on a piece of apparatus that really quite often from day to day deals with life and death situations. And it's a 30-year purchase. We have to bite the bullet, and I think the sooner we get this truck here, the better off we'll all be, and we don't need to discuss it much more.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So you were talking about 5 years. The cost overrun would come out of into the contingency fund. It would be paid up in 5 years, correct? Am I right?
The plan is to draw the excess funds out of IRF and then repay IRF over the course of 5 years.
Okay, so we put money now into IRF every year for the fire truck, plus this would be added on to it. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So what would be the total paying into IRF after all this? If you don't have the answer, maybe our finance has, or the CAO?
The additional contribution for years 2021 through 2025 will impact the operating budget by $43,069.43.
Okay, and that's for everything?
That's for just the additional, paying the additional amount back over 5 years. There would still be the regular IRF contribution on top of that.
So you won't come back to council saying, hey, I have a shortfall, you know where I'm going with that for budget wise, because 43,000 is going to impact your budget, the fire department's, correct?
Their budget's going to go up by that amount, I would imagine.
Yeah. Okay.
Andrew,
that's what
do you
I'm
have something
thinking
to add, just maybe to help clarify this for Councillor Solda?
Yeah, just to be clear, Madam Mayor, what we're going to do is make this additional contribution for 5 years. We still have the IRF payments that we have to make, but we need to review that, bring that back to council with our budgeting process to get the actual IRF payment for the fire department for their equipment in the fall. So we'll bring that back to council and provide you with the details, identifying the additional payment that we need to make for the next 5 years.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Councillor Solda.
Okay. So that doesn't always excite me because eventually it comes off the taxpayers. But the other thing too is, so if in 30 years, while the American dollar keeps going up and up and up, there is no Canadian company that builds fire trucks. I know we talked about that in the past, but just let's be clear. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, so I guess the Canadian manufacturers are a hybrid manufacturer in that the cab and chassis and the pumps still come from the US, and then they construct the body. This one specifically is constructed in Winnipeg, whereas the other 3 proponents that had submitted bids, they're entirely made in the United States.
Okay, so on the hybrid, have we checked with other communities that run fire trucks that are hybrid, and how are they doing? And have they had any big issues with them? I know the government's talking about going green and by 2020 type of thing. So
yeah, sorry, I may have confused the issue a bit by talking about both a hybrid powered vehicle and then hybrid locations of manufacturing. With regards to the company and having some of it made in the States and some of it made in Canada, certainly this company has been around for over 100 years. Our existing fire engine, frontline fire engine, was made by the same company, and in most respects are essentially just an updated version of the exact same truck, really. And in terms of the hybrid, in terms of power sources, the technology is still kind of emerging. This is not the first version of it. So they had kind of an auxiliary diesel powered generator that was just a smaller engine that would run when the truck was on scene. Obviously that is not nearly as green as a battery powered unit. Our understanding is that the departments that do have this technology have seen success, but it is still early days in this technology.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I do like the idea of the battery hybrid technology, but I guess it does help with our energy conservation aspect and also air quality in our community, which is a big issue, I think. What I am concerned about is the added level of sophistication may make the fire engine, I guess, less durable, or maybe change the longevity prospects of it. Could you comment on that technology? I realize it's been around for maybe 20 years, but how does it fare in commercial fire truck applications?
Yeah, and in fire engines, it's not been around for quite that long. Certainly, there's Vancouver just went out and just bought a fire engine. It is not delivered yet. It won't be for a couple of years, I believe. That's fully electric. So this is kind of the in between. The default on the truck is if the batteries don't have enough power to enable the emergency warning lights and other kind of core components of the truck, then the diesel engine kicks in and will be able to sustain the truck in a similar manner to the 10-year-old truck that we have right now. So I don't believe that there's operationally going to be any negative impact, even if the technology isn't quite as good as promised.
Thank you. So my thoughts are, I understand the importance very much of this purchase. And I appreciate that this is, has been a 30-year truck. And one thing we do really well in Port Alberni is take care of our trucks to make sure that we can extend the life of them as far as possible. So, I have no question as to whether or not we need this truck. And I, feel really good having that full confidence in our department and the way that we're taking care of trucks. To know that, it is now time to replace it. But that said, this is a large overage to what our budget was. And I'm really struggling with being able to come up with the funds, even just adding that $43,000 a year for 5 years onto the fire department budget. I mean, that has an impact. We make decisions down to $5,000 sometimes at council to try to, move forward important initiatives. And every project like this takes away. And so I need to feel full confidence that this is exactly the truck that we need. And I understand very much that this is the best ideal truck, but are there other ways aside from the one option that you've given? Are there other options that could be looked at to bring this cost back in line or closer to in line with what the actual budget was? Is the battery the only option, or are there other options that could be looked at?
Well, and that's what we looked at. And so similar to your thoughts, we looked at the price. I looked at the price and said that we need to get this price down. We need to get it down in a way that doesn't affect the operability of the truck. Part of our department's success is that we have reliable equipment that we're able to deploy instantaneously and aggressively go in and attack fires in their incipient stage. And certainly we see a lot of success in that. But we went through and looked line by line at areas that we would have the ability to cut, which is where we did shave off $42,530. So that was $42,530 of things that we would have liked to have had, but in the end, we determined that we could do without in order to get the cost down as much as possible. And I fully appreciate that that despite that, the sticker shock is still there.
Yeah. So is this truck and the features and the options that it has comparable to the existing truck that we're replacing? Or are there features that we're going to be getting with this truck that we don't currently have and that we currently operate without?
It is the same, the things that make the truck expensive are the same things that are in the truck now. So it's the exact same engine that we have in the truck. It's the exact same pump that we have in the truck. It's the exact same cab that we have. You know, the enhancements are that our current truck doesn't have airbags in it. So this truck will have airbags. It'll have additional rollover protection. It'll have, you know, backup cameras, a little more storage so that we can put our auto extrication tools on that so that we aren't running back from across town to grab the other truck to go to a situation where somebody's life is on the line. But really at the core of the truck, it is really 99% the same truck as what's sitting in the bay. Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful to know. And I think my last question is, I know you made the comment that, you know, every community is unique and every truck basically that's built for each community is unique. But is there kind of a ballpark range, and are we in line with it for what communities spend on this type of truck? I know that Beaver Creek, for instance, just bought a truck, and I was trying to find the amount today, and I can't remember it. I couldn't locate it when I was doing a quick search, but I seem to remember it being in the $600,000 range, and I don't quote me on that because I might not be correct, and it also could be a completely different type of truck. So if you were to compare, you know, the needs of this truck with what other communities are spending on a comparable truck, are we in line, and have we looked at that?
Yeah, so good question. Yes, so I reached out and got a few numbers. So Campbell River, as an example, who operate their frontline truck in a very similar manner to us, where they have one staffed fire engine in Hull 1, which has the AutoX tools. It has to be kind of a Swiss Army knife of trucks. They bought a truck that was delivered in 2018 for $895,000 plus tax. They have another one that's going to be delivered this year for $930,000 plus tax. Kitimat took delivery, I want to say it was probably 18 months ago or so. But that truck was $950,000. So yeah, it is unfortunately just the going price for these trucks.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions from council? Councillor Solda and then Councillor Washington.
Yeah, a quick question. I don't really understand hybrids and all that. But so from hybrid to gas, obviously there's going to be a big price difference because anything electric seems to cost us anybody more, a new car or anything like that. So can you just give me a little bit of info on that from the price from gas to hybrid?
Yeah, so just to be perfectly clear, that that hybrid option is really and truly an idle mitigation system. And so what happens there is that the fire engine is powered by a diesel operated engine. And when the truck arrives wherever it is, the core functions of the emergency lighting and anything but the pump essentially can still operate off of the batteries. So it shuts down the diesel engine and runs the batteries. And so the additional cost of that is $29,300.
Yeah, I'm just having the same issues as the mayor is having on this.
Sure.
So just so you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Solda. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two quick questions. You've probably been asked this before, but do we get a trade-in on the old truck, or is it a donation, or is there somewhere we can get the money for it? And
I believe that the figure that I heard for the last time that we were retiring a truck, I believe it was $5,000 that we received for that truck, and then that money would go back into IRF unless otherwise directed. There are certainly programs out there where you can donate a truck to a third world country, and they're happy to get their hands on it, but and I'm not sure if there's any kind of tax write-off implications if you go that route, but suffice to say that the value of the truck is expended by the time that we're getting rid of it.
Okay, and my second part of the question, Chief Owens, do we have inventory of parts that will be virtually useless when this truck leaves us, or have we got anything in stock that won't be used on the next truck?
We don't actually carry a ton of stock anyway, but the advantage of purchasing this truck specifically is because it is so similar to the truck that we have as a frontline engine right now. We should actually be able to become even more efficient, where we don't have, presently we have 3 different styles of trucks from 3 different manufacturers, and this will bring 2 of them into line with each other. So I actually think that there'll be some savings. I'm not sure what we have in inventory for parts for the engine 1, the 30-year-old truck that's going out the door. I don't believe that we have a large inventory. We typically will go out to the vendors.
Thank you. Are there other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, would anybody like to read the motions? And they do need to be read, but one by one. Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, I'd like to read the motions, but should we have an E motion with regards to the ILO mitigation option?
I think it is included at this point. That's what I understood from Chief Owens.
That's right. Yeah.
Included unless we specify otherwise.
So it's included in the $215,000 figure?
Yes, it's included in the 215,000 overage and the total that you find on line 3.
Perfect. I'd like to move the council authorize staff to amend the city's 5-year financial plan bylaw 2024, bylaw number 5003, for the purpose of increasing the funding available for the replacement of the 1991 pumper truck number 1 in the amount of $215,347.15, with funding from the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Second.
And comments from council? So seeing none, I will just add one comment. And although I struggle very much with this purchase, I will support it because I have confidence that our fire department and Chief Owens have done their due diligence to ensure that they have, done their best to make sure our needs are being met, but at the same time, we are being as frugal as possible. But I think it's incredibly important for us to remember as a council that just because this is coming out of a reserve doesn't mean that it's not money spent. And when we have to make sure that we're comparing this or remembering this when we are considering other purchases. So, right now we are being asked to spend $200,000 or budget potentially $200,000 for the big screen at the multiplex, and $200,000 here, $200,000 there. we can't have everything and we have to decide what our priorities are. So I just think it's important to remember these types of purchases when we're being asked to consider other purchases. So with that, unless anyone else would like to comment, I will call the question on this motion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And you can continue, Councillor Paulson.
I'd like to move B, that council approve a repayment plan for 5 years to recover the $215,347.15 back to the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund.
Is there a seconder on that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, so to be clear, this is to pay that amount back via increasing the fire department's budget, most likely over the next 5 years to pay it back. Or looking at other options to be determined at budget time.
Yes.
Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Paulson.
Chief Owens, you know that we're going to hold your hand to the fire with regards to that repayment dollar value. And I would hope that we would exhaust all avenues to make sure that that is no greater than that, and quite often lesser than that $43,000 a year. So we'll hold you to the fire on that one, mister.
Councillor Solda.
And just to be clear, I agree with the mayor regarding other options. I don't want the taxpayers to land up paying this on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And you can continue.
I'd like to move C, that council award the contract for the replacement of fire engine number 1 to Fort Garry Fire Trucks Limited for the price of $890,640.45 plus applicable taxes.
Second, Adam.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. And any further comments on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. You can continue with the last one.
And D, that council direct that an installment payment be paid to Fort Garry Fire Trucks Limited upon award of the contract in the amount of $387,000 from the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund.
Second, Adam.
Okay, moved and seconded, and all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Chief Owens. And we will move on in our agenda to item 8 from the Manager of Planning, Development Permit and Development Variance Permit for 4450 Maitland Street. Oh, Councillor Paulson, do you have a question?
I do not have a question, but I will I'll have to recuse myself from item 8 here, as I am a director and the finance guy for the Low Energy Housing Society. So I will recuse myself from this discussion.
Thank you. And we will just have the city clerk put you back in the waiting room. Thank you. Welcome, Caitlin. And I see we have the proponents online as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So before you for consideration is a concurrent development permit and development variance permit application for 4450 Maitland Street. So the property is currently zoned RM3, high density multifamily residential, and is located in development permit area number 1, multifamily residential. The applicants are proposing to build a 4-story wood framed multifamily residential building on the property with a total of 46 affordable rental units. The project is intended to be a high quality energy efficient building that meets step 4 of the BC Energy Step Code, so net zero emissions. Overall, the development promises to deliver social and environmental values to the community. The applicants have submitted plans and building renderings in support of the development permit, and the character of the proposed development meet the majority of the development permit area DPA guidelines. So the applicant has also applied for a development variance permit with regards to a reduction in the required amount of usable open space, a reduction to the required amount of parking, a reduction to the required amount of accessible parking, and an increase to the maximum building height. The development permit and development variance permit must be considered concurrently in this situation, as any changes to the requested variances will have direct impact on the site plan, as well as the building design, and therefore the development permit submission. So before you today, there are three options for consideration, which are as presented in the report. Option 1, to proceed with issuing development variance permit number 103 and development permit number 20-02 with the conditions outlined in the permit. Option 2 is to not proceed with issuing development variance permit and the development permit and request for further revisions from the applicant. And then option 3 would be to provide alternative direction. So in support of option number 1, I'm going to go through an analysis of the development permit submission and then separately an analysis of the development variances that were requested, just to kind of keep it a little bit, hopefully more clear. It's a lot of information, so sorry if it takes a bit more time than usual today. So with regards to the development permit application, the applicants are, as mentioned, proposing to construct a 4-story wood frame building with 46 dwelling units. On-site parking will be accessed from 8th Avenue, and a concrete sidewalk will be constructed along the north, east, and west sides of the property. The landscaping plan for the property includes a mix of trees, shrubs, and ground cover plants, which enhance the parking lot and common areas. And a bioswale will surround the side and rear yards of the building, playing a role in retaining on-site stormwater. An outdoor common area will be provided and has been designed to be multi-generational and an accessible space, which includes play areas for children. Lighting will also be included in the parking lot and common areas for safety reasons, and light spill will hopefully be mitigated as proposed through intentional placement of lights and landscaping. The form and character of the proposed building mostly achieves the high standards of the city's development permit area guidelines. However, the DPA guidelines do encourage private open space, so things like patios or at-grade balconies adjacent to each dwelling unit to provide for a private outdoor space for occupants next to their individual dwelling units. With the proposed development, there would be there'd be 2 common balconies provided adjacent to common rooms for shared use of all residents instead of private balconies. And in conversations with the applicant, they have indicated that the purpose for this is to reduce facade penetrations in order to maximize energy efficiency in the building design. So the building's design also has a box-like appearance, which is kind of against what the DPA guidelines state should be avoided for most part. However, the applicant has made some alterations to their original proposal by modifying the roof line through stepping and false facade elements, which have helped enhance the appearance. So while the general shape of the building is rectangular, there are some horizontal emphasis and specific elements within the facade that add to the appearance of the vertical orientation. And it should be noted that the proposed building does require a bit of a non-traditional appearance in order to achieve that net zero emissions. So again, thinking of things like reducing various penetrations or variations in the roof line to make sure that the box like structure of the building is achieved in order to make sure that energy is maintained in a way that meets the energy step code. So since the city's development permit area guidelines do not have any considerations for energy efficient trade-offs, council might want to utilize their discretion with how those DPA guidelines are applied, specifically to help achieve that high energy standard. The city's DPA guidelines also should be considered with regards to the open space requirements and about whether or not it's necessary to provide those balconies or private spaces, private open space, if other alternative open space is being provided on the site. Alternatively, council may wish to direct staff to work with the applicant to bring the form and character of the building closer in line with the DPA guidelines. So with regards to the variances, the applicants have requested multiple variances to the zoning bylaw to permit the proposed development. So I'll go through the parking first. So a parking variance has been requested to reduce the required number of parking spaces. The proposed development currently would require 58 stalls according to the regulations, and the applicant is proposing to supply 37 stalls on site, as well as additional stalls off-site on the street. So in total, this would be a 40% reduction, or a variance of 21 stalls. A variance is also being sought to reduce the required number of accessible stalls, which must be provided to match the number of accessible dwelling units. So the proposed building will contain 11 accessible dwelling units, meaning that the number of, under the current regulations, the applicant would be required to supply 11 accessible stalls for the development. So instead, they're providing, or they propose to provide 5 accessible stalls, which is a reduction of 6 stalls. So currently, the city does not have any specific policy guidelines to evaluate the merits of a parking variance on a consistent basis. But in absence of that policy, we believe that there are specific conditions in place that help justify the proposed parking variances for the site, which include the central location of the property, so being right in the kind of the heart of the city, near various commercial nodes and recreational nodes, the proximity to and access to alternative modes of transportation. So there's nearby bus routes. I believe 3 different bus routes run nearby the property, as well as close proximity to bike lanes. Bike parking being provided on site as part of the development, and then additional on-street parking, as I mentioned before, being provided by the applicant for guests and visitors. That being said, I think it is important to consider that a reduction in accessible parking stalls may result in a situation where people who live with disabilities and operate a vehicle not having access to a stall which meets their needed requirements. So perhaps a larger vehicle for a certain type of disability in order to aid in their mobility, not necessarily being provided if there's not enough of those stalls. So in terms of usable open space, the applicant has requested to reduce the required amount of usable open space for the proposed development. For this particular development, the zoning bylaw would require 1,665 square meters of usable open space, which is roughly 40% of the entire site. This calculation is based on the number of dwelling units and the number of bedrooms within each dwelling unit. The applicants are seeking to reduce the required amount of usable open space to 1,367.4 square meters, which is a reduction of 297.6 square meters, or 17.9%. Neither reducing the number of units for the development or increasing the number of stories to make a smaller footprint for the building with the same number of units are considered to be financially feasible for this project by the applicants. The proposed development does include outdoor common area shared by all residents, which will be designed to be accessible, as I mentioned before, and it will include a concrete patio, vegetable garden, sand pit, and children play stream. The proposed bioswale will also incorporate a narrow and widening path with several small bridges that will be usable by residents as well. And again, 2 common balconies will be provided adjacent to the common rooms for shared use of all residents. The city's usable open space definition does allow for development to meet up to 50% of the requirement by providing private balconies or rooftop gardens. As I mentioned before, private balconies are not being provided for reasons related to energy efficiency. And we have had some tentative discussions about possible rooftop gardens, but no, that has not been included in the proposed development plan. So in this instance, we think the implications of reducing the amount of usable open space can be mitigated by the close proximity of Russell Field, which is approximately 120 meters, less than a 5-minute walk from the subject property. And then moving on to the final variance that's been requested, the applicants have also requested to increase, not decrease, increase the allowable maximum building height by 2 feet in order to accommodate that false facade parapet and the stepped elevation of the roof line. Permitting the increase in height will allow the roof line of the building to kind of better satisfy the DPA guidelines, and that came about as a discussion with staff and how to kind of achieve a certain look of the form and character of the building that meets the city's standards. The variance is considered to be minor and is not perceived to have any negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood or anything out of line with what the development would already be proposing on the neighborhood. With regards to the requested variances, in total, all 4 of them, public notification has been given as required by the Local Government Act. A copy of that notice has been attached for reference in the report. And to date, we have the planning department has not received any public input or any comments in opposition or with concern about any of those requested variances. So overall, the planning department supports the issuance of development permit number 20-02 and the development permit or development variance permit number 103 for 4450 Maitland Street with conditions outlined in the permit. The development permit application, we feel sufficiently meets the intent of the development permit guidelines. However, the variances to usable open space and parking variances, they are major deviations from what is required in the zoning bylaw and are quite larger than what we've typically processed in the past or issued in the past in the city of Port Alberni. So it's definitely setting a bit of a new precedent. That being said, it's certainly a location that seems appropriate to test whether or not those types of variances work well within our community. Any requested changes to either the usable open space or the amount of required parking would have a direct impact on the site plan and building design. So if council requests any change to the development, then we will have to return to working with the applicant to see what further revisions can be achieved to address council's concerns. And I think overall, I would just suggest that City Council should consider how the social and environmental values of the proposed building offset the potential impacts that may result from the proposed variances. And then finally, we are also recommending to proceed with developing policy guidelines for considering parking variances in the future and conducting a review of our current usable open space requirements. And part of the main reason for requesting this from you today or the support in that direction is because we really foresee with several other applicants that we're having conversations with right now, similar variances kind of coming through and coming forward to you in the near future for consideration. So if we have a bit of a consistent standard that we know council supports, I think that would be really helpful for staff in considering those in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. And before we take questions from council, I'll just say thank you to you and your staff for all the work that you've put into this application. I know that, as you've said, it deviates from our regular policy in a lot of ways, and I appreciate the work you guys have put into working, to try to make this application fit, recognizing the other values that it brings to our community. So really happy to see what you've brought back in front of us. Are there questions from council? And the applicant is here if anyone has questions directly for the applicant. I'll start with Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, I totally support the project. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to our community and much needed. But my question is, at the public meetings that the component had, a lot of issues regarding the parking and that. Although we're decreasing some of the parking, there was a lot of concerns regarding the neighbors who have to park on the street, as well as when the school happens at the school next to it, there's no parking. So how is that being dealt with?
Are you asking the developer or Caitlin?
Yes, it doesn't matter, whoever wants to answer, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Mike, do you want to comment on that?
So, Madam Mayor, I've just noticed that Mike does not have audio.
Oh.
I'm messaging him, but.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
Caitlin. There.
I'm David Simpson. I'm the architect. I'm here, so I guess by default I'm representing the society, and I'll do my best. You're right. There was concern about parking on the street. It was interesting to me to note that a lot of the residents park on the street rather than park on their lots, which is kind of interesting. So think that's also creating a bit of a crunch for everybody in terms of parking. Generally, we find that this population, these residents do not have the kind of need for cars or the ability to provide cars that the typical neighborhood has. So the variance we're asking for is fairly consistent with what we see in other projects, and we do a lot of BC housing related projects, non-market projects. So we kind of went with the guidelines that we've been using in terms of the experience that the societies are finding for the need. So we don't anticipate a problem. There, you know, at certain times there could be a crunch. There's a lot of street front parking on this site, so that may be a relief as well. The experience that the societies are finding. Oh, there's Mike. So we don't anticipate.
Is that Mike talking?
Yeah.
There, you know, at certain times there could
Mike, can you hear us now?
I can't hear him properly.
Okay, he's muted again. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Cindy, for that question. Hope that answers it.
Well, I hope it answers the people that live in that neighborhood and who use that neighborhood. So that's the main thing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely, and I definitely echo, you know, some of the concerns around parking. Although it's certainly there's peak times of day where it's obviously worse, but there is a bit of a concern in that area, and more development happening in that area as well. So of course that will, you know, continue to put a bit more pressure on it as well. Other questions from council? Councillor Washington and then Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo Councillor Solda's parking issues. My big concern would be for the handicap people. If we've got 11 units that are handicap accessible, but only 5 parking spots, that's just right away that's a concern to me. So I'm hoping that the architect is right, that not all the people will have a car, but that's to get a handicapped person to park on the street and then try to make their way to their unit. It's a bit of a concern to me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just maybe ask the applicant if either of them are able to comment on specifically the accessible spaces. Okay.
Is Mike available, or I can see him, but
yeah, not really sure.
Maybe the questions are too hard. I don't know. Again, it's just
we do have a. Can you go ahead?
Oh, is he there? Go, Mike.
Mike, you're muted again.
I think you can hear me now.
Maybe the questions are too hard.
Yeah.
Again, it's just.
We do have a. Can you go ahead? We do have a. I think you can hear me now.
Yeah. Again, it's just.
We do have a. Go ahead. There are a number of people who we anticipate will be in that handicapped category that won't have vehicles. So we don't really see that as something that will become a major issue for us.
Do you have any statistics on that? Like from, you know, similar BC housing type projects, kind of that you're using as a basis? I'm wondering if Mike could possibly phone in. It would be helpful if we were able to have the applicant answer these questions before we vote on the issue. And I'm wondering if possibly a phone-in connection.
David may have some specific information, but
Mike could possibly phone in. Maybe we could delay this item until later in our agenda, and then Mike could try to join, or the applicant could try to join by phone instead of video. Okay, Council, I'm going to ask if you're okay with delaying this item until later in our agenda. Mike, would you be able to mute yourself, or Davina, are you able to? Mute Mike. Thank you. Maybe our city clerk could work with the applicant so that we are able to actually address some of the questions that we have, especially with so many variances. I think it's important for us to be able to ask the applicant questions before we vote on this issue. So, Council, would you support moving this item to, let's see, maybe we could make a motion to come back to this item after we finish the bylaws section of our agenda. City Clerk, would that work?
I'll move that.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. And City Clerk, does that work on your
Yep.
end? And you can
Yep.
maybe work with them to try to phone in?
That sounds good, Madam Mayor.
Okay, wonderful. So we will vote on that. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Council. So we will come back to this item. Okay, so that takes us to item 9 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, just a general update. Welcome, Willa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I've got a general report in front of you there. And one thing I wanted to bring to your attention was just regarding the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Can everyone please make sure they are muted if they're not speaking? Councillor Solda, you are definitely unmuted. And I think we've lost a couple of councillors. I'm not really sure what's happening right now.
Madam Mayor, I think we need Councillor Paulson back as well.
Oh, yes, yes. And Councillor Haggard has disappeared. She may just have turned her video off for a second. Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Ron, just to update you, just for a heads up, because of some communication challenges, we opted to delay this until further in our agenda, and we've asked the applicants to call in instead of trying to video. So we will, excuse you again when we get back to that, just so for your information. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Willa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So within my report, I referenced the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So I just wanted to loop back around to that and remind Council, when Council first started their term, I indicated that we should be considering the community's needs for the coming decade. So rather than just looking at Council's term, the next 10 to 50 years down the road, we do know that we've got aging facilities. We do know that we have over $2 million in reserve with no specific plan at this stage. And so to that end, staff are currently exploring creating a master plan, which would follow Council's strategic plan around items like things like not duplicating services. Community engagement would be a focal point of the process, and then that plan will guide our future decisions. So an opportunity there, I think, to really set in motion a specific plan with what we'd like to do with our service offerings, our programs, as well as our facilities in the coming decades. And if Council has any questions about my report, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from Council? Councillor Corbeil.
Just a point, if Parks and Rec is putting together a master plan, I trust they're following our strategic plan fairly closely, I hope.
So Madam Mayor, further to my specific point there, yes, we would specifically follow Council's strategic plan in building that master plan.
Perfect. Other questions from Council? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Willa. We will, I guess, move receipt of your report. But I just wanted to thank you for the initiative of working on creating a master plan as well. I think especially when we have items come forward like the multiplex screen, it really highlights the need for a greater strategic plan or facilities plan for Parks and Rec. So appreciate that initiative and looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Washington. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we'll now move on to bylaws. So item 1 from the Manager of Planning, we have development application for 2170 Mallory Drive.
Perfect.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Before you for consideration is a procedural question with regards to scheduling a public hearing for the proposed OCP and zoning bylaw amendments for 2170 Mallory Drive. So the city has received an application to expand the industrial uses permitted at 2170 Mallory Drive. The purpose of the proposed amendments is to help the applicant secure a new tenant for the property. At this time, no specific use or development plan for the property has been identified. The proposed bylaw amendments would change the designation of the property from residential to industrial on the official community plan and include the property in development permit area number 3, industrial, for the form and character of industrial development. The property would also be rezoned from P1 institutional to M1 light industry zone. So the Advisory Planning Commission reviewed the rezoning application at the April 30th meeting earlier this year. And while there was considerable discussion about the application, the majority of the APC recommended that council support the rezoning application with specific conditions. City Council then gave first and second reading of the proposed official community plan and zoning bylaw amendments at the May 25th, 2020 regular council meeting. And since then, the applicant has proceeded to work on all outlined conditions that were requested. And then as directed by council, staff are currently in the process of engaging with Tayshaw First Nation about this application in advance of the public hearing. So the next step in the process is to schedule a public hearing in order to allow for further public input on the application before proceeding to third and final reading of the bylaw amendments. And in this instance, a public hearing cannot be waived because an amendment to the official community plan is proposed. So there are two options being presented to council today to consider. Option 1 is to proceed with scheduling a public hearing, or option 2 is to provide alternative direction. So staff are seeking direction from council to determine how you would like to proceed with scheduling a public hearing and moving forward with this application specifically. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there questions from council on this or comments? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to read the motion that is written or a different motion? Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to move that the official community plan amendment number 31, 2170 Mallory Drive, Manset Family Holdings, bylaw number 5009, zoning bylaw map amendment number 40, 2170 Mallory Drive, Manset Family Holdings, bylaw number 510, and zoning bylaw text amendment number T24, site specific use P1 institutional, bylaw number 5011 be advanced to a public hearing on September 8, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. via video conferencing Zoom platform.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second that, Madam.
Thank you. So moved and seconded. And are there any questions on the public hearing being held by Zoom rather than in person? If there are, the clerk's department could probably comment on kind of the process that they went through and exploring all of the options. Councillor Solda?
I just have a question. We're doing a public hearing tonight at in person. So why are we not doing a public hearing in person on this one?
So I know extensive thought has gone into this. So Davina, if you want to just comment on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did explore a number of options for public hearings, and tonight's one is in person, as Councillor Solda has noted, and we determined that it was not one that would likely attract a significant number of people coming out to that one, so relatively easy to manage. Council also has the option to waive public hearing requirement when applications align with the official community plan. In this particular instance, we anticipate that there may be some more significant public interest, and in considering that, we've tried to figure out the best way to move forward, and thinking that Zoom is likely the best way to go. Public hearings, of course, you can't restrict public attendance, and we are limited by current regulations to a maximum of 50. Whether or not we would have that much attention is hard to predict, but just in order to move forward and in the best way that we thought possible, we felt that Zoom was likely the most efficient way to move this forward. obviously, if council wants to, reconsider that and do something in person, we would certainly, look at that and try and make provisions for that to happen.
Can we leave that open, Madam Mayor? Like, like if we have to have the place and time and everything. Okay.
Yes, like if council is going to set the public hearing date and time today, then the location also has to be confirmed as well. And I'm not sure that, well, actually, we could probably make it happen, but our recommendation at this time is that we proceed with public hearings via Zoom.
Okay, I'll go on your recommendation.
Thank you. And just to add to that, one thing that I know when I was discussing it with staff really stood out to me is that if we do happen to get more than 50 people wanting to come, and that includes council and staff and any staff tech support even. So if we did get more than 50 people, of course, we wouldn't be able to hold the public hearing because there's a restriction on gathering amounts. We wouldn't be able to just, hold it the next day. Like we'd have to cancel it and restart the process every time more than 50 people came. So I think that staff have done a good job here of looking at, how do we continue with doing our business with as little disruption as possible. And there's still the opportunity for written submissions as there always is. If in the future, like we are doing the public hearing tonight, if in the future there are other topics or other items for public hearings where we feel that we'll be able to do them in person without risking that 50-person limit, then we can always explore those probably on a one-off basis. But I think that moving forward with this one on Zoom is probably the safest option, just to make sure that we actually get to hold it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this one coming up September the 8th, are we able to get out to the public that they can put in written submissions as well as, some of those that aren't Zoom technology? They can put in a written, something that can be read out during the Zoom meeting so that their voice is heard?
Thank you. City Clerk, do you want to just comment on that?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Mayor, and that would be part of the, and I know the manager of planning is on there as well, but that is part of the public notice requirement. We would be very clear in developing a process that people would know exactly how they could submit their comments, which in this case would obviously be in writing as well, or we would work with them on the Zoom aspect so that people were comfortable participating that way. But there's also prescribed timelines when the public notices go out in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Wonderful, thank you. Caitlin, anything to add?
The City Clerk summarized it perfectly.
Great. Any other questions from council? Okay. With that then, thank you, Caitlin and Davina, for your work in planning on this, and best of luck to us with our first Zoom public hearing, I think. Okay, so on the motion, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried, thank you. And moving on to bylaw item number 2 from the Manager of Planning, zoning bylaw amendment number 38 for 5859 River Road, Allen, bylaw number 5004. Caitlin.
Thank you. So before you for consideration, our third reading and final adoption of the zoning bylaw amendment number 38 for 5859 River Road. So an application has been made to amend the zoning bylaw to rezone a portion of 5859 River Road from the RR2 semi-rural residential zone to the R1 single-family residential zone. The permitted uses in the R1 are the exact same as the RR2, and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the official community plan. The purpose of the application is to facilitate a lot line adjustment to ensure that the existing driveway is captured fully within the boundary of the neighboring parcel, which is also owned by the applicant. So no additional lots will be created as a result of the process. City Council previously gave first and second reading to the proposed zoning bylaw amendments at the April 14th, 2020 regular council meeting. And then at the July 27th regular council meeting, City Council waived the public hearing requirement for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment in accordance with section 464(2) of the Local Government Act and gave direction to provide public notice in accordance with Section 467 of the Local Government Act. And since then, no public input has been received by the Planning Department to date with any questions or concerns. As well, all conditions have been met by the applicant, so therefore the bylaw amendments are able to proceed now to third and final reading. So there are two options before council today for consideration. Option one is to proceed with third and final reading of the proposed zoning bylaw amendments. And then option two is to provide alternative direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, when we first talked about this zoning amendment, there was some discussion about access to the riverfront. Did that ever happen, Caitlin? And secondly, something I've always wondered about, does the city not own the riverfront at the foot of Golden Street? Two questions.
I can answer the first question. I'm not sure if I can answer the second question without further research. But the first question about the securing some access to the western hooked portion of the property, kind of on the west side of River Road, adjacent to the waterfront. Yes, we have worked with the applicant to secure a statutory right-of-way that would allow for public access if the city was to proceed in future with developing a multimodal or multi-use trail. And that will be, so we have a draft of that, and that will be confirmed before the lot consolidation is approved by the approving officer.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the zoning bylaw amendment number 38, 5859 River Road, Allen, bylaw number 5004, be read a third time.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Third reading. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
I also move that the zoning bylaw amendment number 38, 5859 River Road, Allen, bylaw number 5004, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and numbered 5004.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further final comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And moving on to item 3 from the Manager of Planning, proposed official community plan bylaw and zoning bylaw amendments, citywide cannabis cultivation and processing.
Thank you. So before you for consideration, again, it's a procedural question with regards to scheduling a public hearing. The proposed OCP and zoning bylaw amendments that would permit cannabis production facilities within city limits. So staff have proposed OCP and zoning bylaw changes that would both incorporate public input that was received last year through a public engagement process, and consider best practices demonstrated in other communities that we found out through doing research and discussing with our staff partners in other municipalities. So the proposed approach that we've brought forward to council would permit certain types of cannabis production facilities in industrial zones and limited commercial zones. Additional regulations are being proposed to mitigate concerns about odor, noise, air quality, and clustering of cannabis uses. So as proposed, all cannabis production facilities would as well be required to obtain a development permit to help mitigate those concerns that I was just listing, as well as help ensure a high quality development standard is met by any sort of future applicants. So staff have prepared the OCP and zoning bylaw amendments, which have gone to the Advisory Planning Commission, and they have indicated their support for what has been proposed. City Council has given first and second reading of the proposed bylaws at the May 25th, 2020 regular council meeting. And up until now, the bylaw amendments have not been able to proceed forward just because of COVID-19 restrictions and us working through how we're proceeding with public hearings. So the next step in the process, now that we've had some time to kind of evaluate the pandemic situation and determine a process for public hearings, is to then proceed with scheduling a public hearing in order to allow for more public input on the application before proceeding to third and final reading of those bylaw amendments. So again, a public hearing is required and cannot be waived because there are OCP amendments being proposed. So at this point, staff are seeking direction from council to determine how you would like to proceed with the bylaw amendments and how you would like to proceed with scheduling the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council on this? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know if this is going to be a contentious issue in the community or not. I know there is an extensive survey and the planning department did a lot of public consultation and trying to put this together, but I'm really concerned about having this public hearing by Zoom because it may not give enough people in the community a voice on this subject. And I know there's concerns about how many people will come or not come, but if we think there could be a lot of community feedback, maybe we could do it over 2 evenings. I don't know, but I'm just really concerned about doing this over Zoom for this topic. That's all. It just because some people may not feel comfortable using Zoom. That's my only question.
Thank you. Does the planner or clerk want to comment on the option of a multi-night public hearing?
Madam Mayor, I certainly from the clerk's perspective, we haven't considered that. And typically a public hearing date and time is set. I'm not sure that we could specify it will be done over several nights. We would have to establish a date and time for the public hearing, and then people participating should be able to see and participate and hear all of the proceedings. So that's something we haven't considered.
I know that the idea of a public hearing by Zoom is very different than what we're used to, and it feels different, and so it feels uncomfortable. But I think that in talking this through with staff, I think that they have given great consideration to making sure that people have as much access, if not more access, to our public hearings than as they always do. And the reason I say potentially more is we don't normally even live stream our public hearings. So I think that with our public hearings being on Zoom, they're live streamed, anyone can log on and watch. I guess maybe my question to City Clerk would be, will we have an opportunity for people to submit maybe live, as we have our council@portalberni.ca email, could people submit emails throughout the public hearing, for instance, to be included? Oh, City Clerk, you're muted.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Again, we still have to consider the actual process that we would follow, but it would be our intent that everybody has as much opportunity as possible to provide their input, whether it is via written submissions through Zoom, phoning through Zoom, appearing by video, or emailing. I think all of those opportunities are available.
Thank you. I understand the hesitance of doing it, and this is an important topic. I also think this is a topic we've talked about in the community and had multiple other, certainly multiple other opportunities for public input that have informed us to get to this point. So I don't think this is an opportunity, or I don't think that this is an issue that the public hasn't spoken to yet. We know that we need to give as much opportunity as possible, but I think the fact that we have, we've gone through a public input process, we've had on cannabis, we've had committee of the whole meetings, there was a community engagement process done by the planning department. There's been a lot of input on this, additional to multiple meetings where people have been able to come out. So I feel like this is a safe one for us to do by Zoom. And I think that the public is getting used to watching us by Zoom as well. So as long as we are really clear in our process and really clear, you know, in our remarks at the beginning of the meeting, if need be, that there is still an opportunity for people to submit and they understand the instructions, I think we can ensure that people have access and people are comfortable. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment on that. It actually took me a while to get used to having meetings by Zoom, so it's not a comfortable process. But I think with City Clerk stating that they can do live emails and they can take input, that gives me a bit of comfort. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I do support Zoom meetings in terms of for public meetings, but I wonder if we can also consider a hybrid model for public hearings to have both an in-person component and a Zoom component at the same time concurrently. And then that way, those who are unable to use the Zoom platform can show up in person to voice their concerns. Thank you.
City Clerk, do you want to comment on that? Because I think that's one of the options that was explored.
Again, Madam Mayor, I can't really comment with great comfort on that at this time as to how the, you know, a hybrid type approach would work. We'd have to consider that, you know, with the technology and with our facilities and just how exactly we could make that work. I mean, we will certainly, we still have to sort of firm up the process, and we will consider all, you know, avenues that are available to us to invite participation.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the official community plan amendment number T5 cannabis cultivation development permit area regulations, bylaw number 5012 and zoning text amendment number T25 cannabis cultivation, bylaw number 5013 be advanced to a public hearing on September 14th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. via video conferencing the Zoom platform.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. So at this point, Council, we will move back in the agenda to item 8 from the Manager of Planning, the development permit and development variance permit for 4450 Maitland Street. And hopefully the applicant is back on now and able to answer questions. And we are at the point now where we are taking questions from Council. So I think, Councillor Paulson, if you want to recuse yourself again, if we could just put him back in the waiting room, that would be great. Thank you. Let's see, I still see Councillor Paulson there. We'll just wait for the city clerk to, there we go, perfect. Okay, so I think the last question that had been asked of the applicant was in regards to the reduction in accessible parking spaces. And Mike, we were asking if you had statistics to kind of justify the number of the reduction that you're asking for in handicap or accessible parking spaces. And you are muted right now, so you do have to tap to unmute yourself. We'll just give a moment to figure this out.
Okay.
There we go.
Now you can hear me, right?
We can hear you.
Okay. I don't have those specific statistics, although if David's still with us, if David Simpson's still with us, he may have them. I just know that with our experience with handicapped folks in our other building, they don't tend to have vehicles because they don't have the income. And so they rely on taxis, they rely on friends, they rely on relatives to move them around. And it's certainly our feeling that 50% is more than sufficient in terms of the number of parking spaces for our handicap residents.
And is there some kind of contingency plan for if you do end up with more people who will need to use those spaces to, I mean, maybe assign them on an as needed basis or something?
Yeah, we can certainly, reassign some of the other spaces for handicapped folks. The same way we have a number of parking spaces that are for electric vehicles. Electric vehicles tend to be pretty expensive, so that might not be something that many of our tenants would have. But nonetheless, we feel the need to have access to those kind of spaces for that facility, for that building. And we do have the ability to reassign spaces as needed.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions from council? Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the public hearing, and Councillor Solda did talk about this, the only concern about the project was parking spaces from the residents in the area. So is there any way that the city could put up signage in front of people's residences to reserve a spot for that resident? Because I think one of the people who spoke said that didn't have parking on their lot. They had to park on the street. So I don't think that a new development, we should approve a new development and a reduction of spaces and put the residents at risk of not having any parking in front of their homes. That just doesn't seem fair to the residents right now. So can someone respond to that, the CEO or somebody in Public Works? I don't know if we have anybody on the call, but is that a possibility that we can maybe explore?
Caitlin, do you want to comment on that in terms of parking requirements for existing houses? Oh, you're muted, Caitlin.
Sorry, could you just re-articulate the question there?
I think she was wondering about, at the public hearing, one of the concerns expressed was from a resident who lives across the street that they don't have parking on their property, and so they have to park on the street. And with the addition of the shelter, there's often, it's hard to find parking already. So she's concerned about adding more residents and with a reduction in parking spaces. So if you have anything to comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. And unfortunately, with existing houses that were constructed before the zoning bylaw, they're legally non-conforming, and we have no ability to go in and make people, create parking stalls for their houses per se. But I think the development permit process with regards to this application is intended to make sure that we have this discussion with council in a public forum to assess whether or not we think as a community the development is meeting the needs of that area. I think there's a lot of room, and this is maybe a bit more of an engineering comment per se, and I'm not the director of engineer, but I think from probably from an engineering perspective, we have quite wide roads, and the applicant is providing some on-street parking for visitors and guests. So I think that should create an actual space for some of those cars. In terms of the actual number of stalls being provided for the residents of the development, I think that's where it's important to know, some of those building statistics and to understand whether or not we think as a city, if this is a direction that we want to go in. Many other communities have proceeded with parking variances and parking reductions to increase affordability of developments, and I do think that this is a good site within the city to test that theory out because of its central location and proximity to other routes. But I think it's a little bit of an unknown territory that we're kind of going in. And then just to go back on the comment about flipping stalls from accessible stalls to non-accessible or non-accessible stalls to accessible stalls, I just want to point out that it's a little bit more challenging than it sounds. And you can't just, put a paint indicator on the stall and say, oh, it's accessible now, because there's actually municipal requirements around width and length of those stalls. So other stalls will be smaller and might not meet that accessible need. So just want to provide that comment as well.
Thank you. And another comment that Councillor Haggard had was around the possibility of, resident only or assigned kind of parking. And I don't know if the planner wants to comment on that at all either, but I would just add that we have had that request from other areas of the community as well to consider resident only parking. And I think that if we are going to consider that, we should consider it strategically for the entire community and whether or not it's applicable rather than looking at just a one-off issue. But once we get to the point where this is built and we evaluate, further how many of the residents are driving their own vehicles and that type of thing, I think that's definitely the type of issue that we could come back to, Councillor Haggard, because that type of change can be made anytime. I would just prefer that we make it in a strategic way rather than a one-off situation.
I would appreciate that, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, two questions. One to Caitlin. This is the second time in a couple of weeks we've had issues around parking. The other one, of course, being out Gertrude Street. And our bylaws simply say 1.25 per dwelling unit. And I did a little bit of research. The NIMO, for example, has 5 different areas. And depending on how close they are to, for like the lowest standard is in downtown Nanaimo, where it could be as low as 0.45 units, parking spots per unit if it's a bachelor suite. So I think we have to put a little bit more work into this, or we're going to be forever looking at changing our bylaws. Secondly, I think Mr. Simpson pointed out that there was considerable parking on Maitland Street, and if I heard correctly, there's going to be a sidewalk up Maitland and around 9th. Is that correct, Mr. Simpson?
Yes, all 3 street fronts are going to be a curb and sidewalk and landscape.
So would there be angled parking around the area?
No, right now it's just considered to be parallel parking.
And do you have
we've been through that with engineering, and I think that was the end solution.
And how many spots do you think there would be?
Hang on, and I can tell you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. We're showing 10, and we're showing a loading area in front of the building entrance on Maitland. I'd also make a comment just back on the creating more accessible parking stalls. Probably what Caitlin isn't aware of is we have a blanked out area for turnaround for vehicles, which there's a car parked on either side of that. So that actually provides additional space for another 2 cars to be accessible. In other words, there's the space beside that where no car can park that would allow a person access to their vehicle. So there is the potential for some flexibility, and there's also room there for drop off for people needing assistance if they're being brought by friends or whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Silva.
Yeah, just a quick thing. Some of the people were concerned too with the shelter. The shelter went with less parking, and there seems to be a lot of people parking, and that was another concern. But what I would really want to touch on is Handy Dart. I know there's people that have approached me that they can't assess different areas in our community in front of a building because of parking issues. So you mentioned a drop off, and so that would include the Handy Dart, I'm assuming, and angle parking. So you went with parallel parking instead of angle. Is that feasible? I know a lot of people do that now. When the old hospital was up there, there was angle parking. So I thought there would be more room with angle than there would be with parallel. So I'm just throwing it. I might be in the weeds right now. I support your project, but I'm just bringing that forward because it was concerned by people to me. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I can just add that the street fronts were worked out in collaboration with engineering. So, and I wasn't personally part of those meetings. So I can only say that this is what the solution was decided to be for the parking. I know angle parking provides for more cars. it is also a little more dangerous, I would say, or more awkward to use in some ways, because you have to back out into a driving lane. And so I know that's where some municipalities have gone away from it. I can't comment for Port Alberni, but that's one of the considerations is safety for people parking.
It's just we have wide streets.
Oh, you have very wide streets. I know.
So there you go.
I'm very envious of your streets.
We have a strong preference for angled parking in this community.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. Councillor Poon, did you have your hand up?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Washington, any questions? Okay. I think that there's been some comments from our planner here about how this application didn't really meet our guidelines and the need to review some of our guidelines to allow for variances due to increased or to accommodate increased energy efficiency. I think that our council as a whole is excited to see this project move forward and definitely sees the benefit of it. And I think at the same time, it's been a bit of a struggle for our planning department because they're trying to meet the guidelines that we have, and this project doesn't really fit that box. So I've heard some suggestions come forward today, I think that kind of speak to that as an issue. So I think that Caitlin does have a recommendation for developing a policy of consideration for parking variances and open space. So I think that, it's brought forward already, and I think it will be of great value to review some of the policies that we have in place just to make this all a little bit easier next time. With that, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motions one by one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the following. 1, vary section 7.9 required amount of parking from 58 parking spaces to 37 parking spaces.
Do you want to start it, sorry, just with that council authorize?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. And then I think actually it can probably be read. Let's see. City Clerk, would you like us to read all of it at once? The two at the end are kind of separate from this, but should the variances be done one by one or all together?
They can be done one by one, Madam Mayor, but on each occasion you can perhaps omit the legal description just to shorten them up, but each one individually would be good, and also have to go back and consider the development permit as well.
Yes, thank you. And that's right, in item A, Councillor Corbeil.
Okay, I move that the City Council authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 103 to vary zoning bylaw 4832 as follows. 1, vary section 7.9.
I think we're at the wrong spot still. So under item 8A, there is that council authorized the issuance of development variance permit number 2002.
Okay, let's try this one more time. That the City Council authorized the issuance of development permit number 20-02, and that the city clerk be authorized to sign that permit, including the following development plans prepared by DYS Architecture titled ALEHS, dated July 13th, 2020, and attached to this report as item D -drawings, item 1-23.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any final comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And if you want to continue there, that'd be great.
Development variance permit number 103-4450 Maitland Street. Mayor to invite the manager of planning to provide background information pertaining to this application and advise if any correspondence and or late correspondence has been received. The mayor, that the City Council authorized the issuance of development variance permit number 103 to vary zoning bylaw 4832 as follows. 1, vary section 7.9 required amount of parking from 58 parking spaces to 37 parking spaces, a variance of 21 parking spaces for the property located at 4450 Maitland Street and legally described as Lot A, District Lot 1, Alberni District Plan VIP 26237, PID 003-551-814.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any comments on this part of the variance? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
2, vary section 7.5 handicap parking requirements from 11 parking spaces to 5 parking spaces. A variance of 6 parking spaces for the property located at 4450 Maitland Street.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that one? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
3, vary section 5.163A, conditions of use from 1665 square meters of usable open space to 1367.4 square meters of usable open space, a variance of 297.6 meters for the property located at 4450 Maitland Street.
Second.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Washington. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried.
4, vary section 5.16.2 site development regulations maximum heights principal building from 14 meters to 14.61 meters, a variance of 0.61 meters for the property located at 4450 Maitland Street.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried.
5, that the City Council direct staff to proceed with developing a policy for consideration of parking variances.
Okay, is there a seconder on that?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. We've already had discussion on this. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried.
And lastly, that the City Council direct staff to conduct a review of zoning bylaw number 4832, usable open space requirements in order to consider modifications to the bylaw.
Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Okay, moving on. We've done item 9 as well as bylaws. So we will move on to correspondence for action. Item 1 from Terry Deacon, the mural project.
Madam
Chair.
Mayor,
Yes.
we need to bring Ron back.
Oh, yes. See, there he is. He's back. Thank you. So item 1 is a letter requesting council consider reallocating funds. Would anybody like to speak to this? CAO. Tim, if you could just comment on those funds and kind of what they were originally intended for.
Sure, Madam Mayor. We'll just catch up on the agenda here. We're talking about the letter from Rotary, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So Aerosmith Rotary Club has asked that the city redirect funds that was set aside several years ago for decorative crosswalks, and that money be reallocated to the mural the ongoing current mural project. So as I understand it, the Rotary Arts District body is no longer active, and so they don't think they'll be undertaking that decorative crosswalk work for the city, and they'd like to repurpose that money to the mural project. Council may recall that several years ago, the city was approached by Rotary and asked to fund. They proposed some decorative crosswalks on the Argyle corridor. Council funded that, I believe, to the tune of $5,000, and that money is still being held by the city pending that project. So if council would like to reallocate that, you can do that, and there will be no impact to budget.
Thank you, Council. I think this is a really positive project happening in our community, and it just kind of clicked in my mind when I suggested this when Terry was speaking, that since we hadn't used these funds, and it is a reasonably small amount, I think this is, and since it's both Rotary projects, I think this would be a great place to reallocate those funds and just help that the mural project be successful. Councillor Solda, did you have a comment?
No, I'm going to just move that the letter dated July 30th, 2020 from Terry Deacon, Mural Project Chair, requesting that the city allow funds that were previously allocated for the Crosswalk project be reallocated to the Rotary Community Mural Project be received, and further that council approves the reallocation of the funds as requested. That's great.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further comments? Councillor Paulson.
I am so definitely in favor of this project. Do you have any idea how much those funds are that were allocated?
We think it's $5,000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think based on their project budget, this will be a really great help for them. I know they're trying to narrow down their scope of work as much as possible and find donations wherever they can, but I think this should probably get them there to top up their fundraising. So it's I think this is a great place for us to use those funds. So with that, I will call the question on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 2 from Mike Rattan, Board Chair of Alberni Low Energy Housing Society, a letter dated July 31st requesting council waive the building permit fees for the Maitland Street. Sorry, Ron, you can, I assume you're recusing yourself. We will put you back in the waiting room for the same reason, so I won't make you say it again. And this is just requesting that council waive the building permit fees for the Maitland Street Village, which is, of course, the project that we just approved the variances and the development permit for. Council, are there questions on this? Okay, Councillor Poon and then Councillor Washington.
I'll move that we receive the report.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor Solda. So motion to receive. And then Councillor Washington, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's hard to endorse something like this when we have no idea of the cost. So I think we have to, before we can waive anything, we have to figure out how much money we're going to waive. So I agree with it, just to be received for now and then do some research on it for later.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. So my question is, isn't BC Housing being part of the partnership? Where's their money coming from to start with? That I thought it was all pretty well, you know, BC Housing and stuff like this. So why are we waiving? Again, I like to see a dollar figure before I waive anything.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion to receive at this point. And Tim, anything you want to add, or Caitlin? I know you're both available.
Nothing from me, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anything from you, Caitlin?
I do have some costs. If you want specifics, I'm happy to bring that back in a further report, or I can give you the figures that I have now, which I believe should be accurate.
You can go ahead with the figures if you have them.
Okay, sounds good. So based on the proposed development, the building permit fee is $29,474, and the development cost charge associated with the project is $219,739.24. So, and then as per the city's DCC reduction bylaw for affordable housing projects, a 50% DCC waiver has been applied, which is providing a cost savings of $109,869.62. And then the current outstanding amount owed then is just, I believe, $138,843.62. So that will be what's remain owed.
That's great information to have. So we have given $110,000 already for this project in DCC reductions.
Madam Mayor?
Councillor Solda.
I just want us all to be aware too, we have a lot of housing projects coming up pretty soon, and we're going to be asked all this again. I just wanted to put it out there too, so that we will be asked.
Wonderful. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Would somebody get Councillor Paulson back? We won't forget next time. Thank you. Now, before I move on to correspondence for information, City Clerk, there was a late item, and I'm sorry, I didn't have a pen, so I couldn't write down where we were adding it. Was it correspondence for action?
No, Madam Mayor, it's going to be under Section K, report from in camera. So after info correspondence.
Wonderful, thank you. So we will move on then to correspondence for information.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 4 items. One letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, particularly the Honorable Selena Robinson. In it, she highlights the communications that she's had with mayors and regional district chairs about COVID-19 and economic recovery. We have a second letter from Tessa Hall of Equilibrium Energy Solutions, and she was writing in follow-up to a presentation that she gave to Council on the 8th of April in 2019 regarding the implementation of BC Energy Step Code. The third item for information is from the Honorable Carol James, and in it she is responding to Mayor Minion's letter looking for reinstatement of the property tax deferment program. The letter highlights a number of deferment programs that the province offers. And so anyways, it was just responding to that and bringing that to our attention. And then the last item is a suicide awareness walk that will be taking place on Thursday, September 10th from 1 to 3 p.m. And that's everything.
Thank you. Are there any items councillors would like to speak to? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt of the correspondence? Councillor Poon.
I'll move receipt of items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Thank you. Okay, moved and seconded. Seeing no further comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And moving down to report from in camera, if staff would like to just give an overview of this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a report from the in-camera meeting that was held this morning, August 10th. Council received correspondence from the Ministry of Forest Lands Natural Resources inviting comment from Council regarding TFL 44 acquisition of tenure agreement to the Huu-ay-aht First Nation. Council endorsed a resolution that the City of Port Alberni send a letter to the Honourable Doug Donaldson, Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, expressing Council's wholehearted support in Huu-ay-aht First Nation acquiring ownership of the forest tenure, and further that Chief Robert Dennis and Council, Huu-ay-aht First Nation, be copied.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? Okay, it's just being released for information, but I will just say on behalf of Council that we are very excited and appreciative of the ongoing investment into our community and surrounding areas from Huu-ay-aht First Nation. And certainly excited about this partnership to see what it does for our local area and forest operations in the area. We will move on to council reports. Would anybody like to speak to any specific items? Councillor Solda.
Yeah, again, Madam Mayor, from last time that I made a report, I just want to, again, people in the community that are from Alberta or wherever they're from, they're still getting hassled. Someone wrote, I'm a little hurt and disappointed. I went out to buy flowers and a drink. It was my wife's anniversary. I stopped at 4 places, Starbucks. They did an awesome job with the drinks. I'll pass that. I also stopped at Walmart, Canadian Tire, Save on Foods. During one of the 3 stops when I was away from my car, someone wrote on the back of my window, go home. I think they did it because I had Alberta plates, not nice. I purchased a house here for retirement as the people are friendly and nice. And I do have 2 homes, one in BC, one in Alberta. I spend all my free time here with my family. I also have several relatives here, including my dad. Please take into consideration that people might be visiting family or their own residents here. It's not nice to write mean stuff on people's property, even if you consider that we shouldn't be here because of the pandemic. We follow all the same rules as you do in social distancing. And I've even heard people are taking lug nuts off a car, and that's criminal. So again, people are here for their own reasons. My son's in the United States. If it was a reversal, he would be in trouble because he has BC plates. And again, please ask why they're here before you panic.
Yeah, I think the important message there is there are a lot of reasons that people may be here that are completely legitimate reasons. And of course, we all want to do our best to follow Dr. Bonnie Henry's orders and recommendations. I think that there is a correct way to handle if you are concerned about whether or not someone is following the rules. You can call the non-emergency line at the RCMP. There is also a line that the provincial government has put out for people to report tips to. That is the correct thing we should be doing if we have concern. And, you know, of course, we do want people to be staying close to home and following those recommendations, but it's not acceptable to be taking it into your own hands and certainly not to be you know, doing things like what's being described there. So, so thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor Solda.
Thank you.
Any other items for councillor reports people would like to highlight? Okay, seeing none, I will move receipt of council reports. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Washington. All in favor? Carried. And we will move on to new business, which is an opportunity for council to raise issues for this or subsequent meetings. And Councillor Corbeil, I'll let you go first because you had added an item that we may have missed. So go ahead if you want to, even if you wanted to start with clarifying maybe what you're hoping, what you're looking for.
Well, what I'm looking for is for the city to employ a civil engineer to conduct a seismic assessment of the train station. And if you remember our discussion last time, I think, Madam Mayor, you said, you know, if we lease this out, we will be responsible for potentially as much as $1 million of upgrading that building. We should find out before we even get involved what's necessary. The change in occupancy will trigger the need for a valuation anyways. So I would suggest if there was going to be $1 million to upgrade, we probably are using that facility for its best purpose right now. But to put out expressions of interest when we really don't know what needs to be done to make that building sound sounds like a little cart before the horse.
Yeah, and I think this concern is coming from the architect's report that we had on that building and some of the upgrading that was stated to, you know, need to be done to bring the building up to standard. Tim, would you be able to just comment on the work that's been done to date and where you're at with this, the expression of interest or, you know, gathering information on the building, if that's something you're doing?
Sure. Madam Mayor, the RFP document that you saw that would be converted to an expression of interest document has 7 appendices. Appendix 2 describes the base building, summarizes the building. It sets out, I think, much of what Councillor Corbeil is talking about. It says the scope of work described in this design brief will encompass the creation of a complete base building ready to receive the interior tenant improvements of any new occupant. And it goes on to describe the structural upgrades in fairly decent detail. I can read those if you like. But I think we've captured, in essence, what's required to meet the BC Building Code 2018 edition. And I don't think any proponent should go into this reading this without having their eyes open as far as what they're getting themselves into.
And Tim, are you envisioning that a proponent would come in and do all of that work on our building?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that a proponent would say, I will lease your building and I will make these improvements. And we don't know until we get proposals, whether they'll require the city to help with those improvements or whether there would be some kind of offset of lease payments to reflect the amount of capital funds invested by the proponent. We won't know those things until we receive expressions of interest.
Sure. Councillor Corbeil, do you want to, does that satisfy to start for us to go out, in your opinion, or are you looking for more detail to be provided to interested parties, possibly?
Well, I kind of think the bylaw or the regulation The BC Building Code specifies must be evaluated by a structural engineer. Now, Tim, if you're talking about information that came from a structural engineer, then we're solid. But if it's from somebody other than that, I don't think we're meeting the code.
Yeah, and we're not undertaking any work. Any proponent would have to pull permits and undertake the work, and that work would include a structural engineer drawing a plan and then follow that plan. Now, the city could could hire a structural engineer to develop that plan. It's going to be difficult for us to design structural upgrades to a building when we don't know what the final purpose or use is going to be.
I think if I could just kind of maybe try to sum this up, because I think that what we're kind of hearing is that Councillor Corbeil is saying, you know, we want to be able to have this information ready for a proponent so that they know what they're potentially getting into, or we know what our rough costs are going to be to update this building to a place where it is actually ready for someone to come in and do their leasehold improvements and lease the building. And Tim, what you're saying is that we have provided them the information. The next step would be for them to go to a structural engineer or do their, you know, plans and submit for potentially a building permit. I think the disconnect here might be that during the architect's report, there was a lot of time spent on, you know, upgrades that would be needed to the building. And the disconnect may be who's going to be responsible for those upgrades. And my concern when I spoke to the city not wanting to take on a large cost, or me not wanting to take on a large cost to get this building leased out, my concern is that I don't think our building is in leasable condition right now where a proponent could come in and just do their own upgrades that would be typically expected of someone leasing a building and, you know, and actually lease it out. I think that we have a lot more work to be done, and typically that would be by the building owner. So it sounds to me like Ron is wanting to get a better understanding before we go out to expression of interest of what those potential costs might be. Is that correct, Ron?
Yes, that is correct. And I also think that that would probably give us more people interested in putting in a expression of interest if they had a little bit of an idea what well, it all falls back on us. If it sounds like we've committed pretty much to leasing this. So I would think that if somebody wants to go in there and have a flower stand, they're going to turn around to the city and say, well, I'm not paying $500,000 or $750,000 to upgrade this. Mm-hmm. It will be our responsibility as the leaser.
Yeah, so I mean, it might be, it might not be. It depends on the agreement that we strike. So I think that the options we have and the current direction that we've given are that we go out for expression of interest. Any person interested or business interested would have all of the documents that we've provided, and they would be able to make their own kind of, you know, not a full proposal, but, you know, an expression of interest to say kind of what their business plan is and what they're willing to contribute. Then it would be brought back to council for council to decide, do we want to move forward with that or not? So I think the hope is that someone's going to come in and say, we are going to upgrade your building to make it suit our purposes. And if someone comes in and says, we want to put a building here, or we want to put a business here, but we want you to upgrade it, then we would be able to have that discussion at the time. That's what I see more likely is going to happen. But there's always a chance that somebody will come in and want to upgrade it for us. And my concern is just that we don't have a budget to upgrade that building at this point. So that's why I wanted to look at possible land sale of the adjacent lands prior to an expression of interest. So council, at this point, the direction is that we've given is to go out for expression of interest. If we want to pause that and do some more research, we can do that, or we can just continue as previously directed and see what kind of interest we get. So if there's an appetite to change our direction, now would be the time for a motion for that. And if not, we'll just continue as we've previously directed. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I understand Ron's approach, but I think that we should continue the course that we've set, and because there's still no guarantee that we will get expressions of interest even once we have an engineer inspected or whatever. So then we will have spent, a considerable amount of money and still have no expression of interest.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so at this point, we will continue, or staff will continue with pursuing the expression of interest, converting the document and putting that out. I have asked, we did pass a motion that that I made to add to our next agenda, which would have been this one, the discussion around the train station lands or the parking lots adjacent to the train station. So we will be bringing that to our next council meeting for a more thorough discussion on if we want to subdivide, if we want to try to sell those lands, which could potentially assist with some improvements to the train station building, which we would be keeping. So we can further this conversation at our next meeting. But at this point, without a motion, I think we will just continue on. Any other items councillors would like to bring forward? Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just a quick question for staff, or they can answer later, regarding the squash court. What's happening there? Because we haven't seen anything happening. And also the house that burnt down by the dike and it's all boarded up. Do they know how long? Like, do the people are asking me, how long does it get to stay like that? And do they have to do something? Do we have a bylaw regarding it? So I don't know. I have no problem with the report next time or something, Madam Mayor.
Are you meaning the Margaret Street house that we had a remedial order on at one point?
Yes.
Tim, are you able to give just quick updates, or do you want us to request a report?
Madam Mayor, we can bring information at your next meeting. We're just not prepared to respond to those two questions right now with accuracy.
I'm good with that. Do you want a motion, Madam Mayor, or?
That would be great.
So I'll move that we have a report or an update on the Margaret Street house that's burnt and boarded up, and on the squash court, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Corbeil, and I would suggest that this would just need to be a very brief report on any new information, not something that is detailed and will take up a significant amount of staff time. Okay,
exactly.
On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and question period. Have we received any questions?
We have not, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. With that then, would somebody like to move adjournment with the recognition that council does need to stay on? Moved by Councillor Solda and seconded by Councillor Paulson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So councillors, if you could just remain on the Zoom, please.